When you simply disappear, the first thing she feels isn't anger or sadness, it's confusion. Confusion replaces certainty the moment your predictable presence is gone. While you were available, consistent, and emotionally accessible, her mind had a clear understanding of where you stood. She knew what to expect from you, and expectation creates emotional comfort. Even if attraction wasn't fully appreciated at the time, when you disappear without explanation, that comfort dissolves. Her certainty was built on patterns. Your messages, your availability, your attention, they formed a routine she subconsciously relied on. When that routine stops abruptly, her mind struggles to fill the gap. She asks herself what changed. Was it something she said? Did you lose interest? Did you meet someone else? The lack of answers forces her to confront uncertainty, and uncertainty creates emotional discomfort. Confusion is powerful because it disrupts emotional control. As long as she felt certain, she felt in control of the situation. She knew the dynamic, she knew the pace. But when you disappear, that control weakens. She no longer has access to your emotional state. She doesn't know if you're thinking about her or if you've moved on. That loss of clarity shifts the balance and pulls her attention inward. The mind hates unanswered questions. When clarity is removed, the brain works overtime to restore it. This is why confusion often leads to curiosity. She begins replaying conversations, reanalyzing moments, and searching for meaning where none was given. Silence turns simple interactions into unresolved puzzles, and unresolved puzzles demand focus. What intensifies this confusion is the absence of drama. If you disappeared in anger or conflict, she could rationalize it, but calm disappearance removes explanation. There's nothing to label or dismiss, just silence, and silence feels heavier than words because it carries no clear meaning. It forces interpretation, and interpretation is emotionally exhausting. Confusion also challenges her assumptions about you. She may have believed you would always be available, that you would reach out eventually, that you needed her attention more than she needed yours. Your disappearance contradicts that belief. And when beliefs are challenged, emotional recalibration begins. She starts reassessing the dynamic, your role in her life, and her influence over you. This confusion isn't loud. It doesn't show up as immediate action. It shows up as mental noise, as lingering thoughts, as moments where she catches herself wondering what you're doing or why you're not there. And the longer certainty remains absent, the deeper that confusion settles. Disappearing calmly replaces emotional certainty with unanswered questions, and unanswered questions don't fade easily. When you disappear, the impact isn't created by something you said, it's created by what's suddenly missing. Emotional absence hits deeper than words because words can be argued with, dismissed, or forgotten. Absence cannot. When your presence is removed, the emotional space you once filled becomes noticeable, and that absence carries weight she didn't anticipate. While you were around, your attention blended into her emotional environment. Your messages, your consistency, your energy became part of her normal rhythm. People rarely measure the value of something while it's constant. They feel it when it stops. The moment you disappear, that emotional rhythm breaks. The silence feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity creates awareness. Emotional absence forces contrast. She starts comparing how things feel now versus how they felt when you were present. And if your presence brought comfort, lauder, stability, or validation, that contrast becomes sharp. It's not dramatic pain, it's a quiet emptiness that lingers, an absence that can't be filled easily because it was uniquely yours. Arguments trigger defensiveness, explanations trigger resistance. But absence triggers reflection. With no emotional interaction to distract her, her mind turns inward. She remembers moments she didn't fully appreciate at the time. She recalls conversations that felt insignificant then, but feel meaningful now. Emotional memory becomes louder in silence. What makes absence hit deeper is that it's self generated. You're not reminding her of what she lost. Her emotional system is. The brain is wired to notice change. When something familiar disappears, the mind flags it as important. That's why silence after connection often creates stronger emotional reactions than confrontation ever could. Absence also removes emotional reassurance. Even if attraction wasn't fully acknowledged, your presence provided a sense of emotional availability. When that availability is gone, it can feel destabilizing. Not because she depended on you, but because she assumed you would always be there. That assumption quietly dissolves. The emotional impact grows with time. At first, silence feels like space. Then it feels like distance. Eventually, it feels like loss. Not loss of you as a person, but loss of access, loss of certainty, loss of emotional comfort. And those losses are felt gradually, not instantly. Emotional absence doesn't beg to be felt, it settles in. And once it does, it's far harder to ignore than any words ever spoken. When you disappear without explanation, curiosity doesn't just appear, it takes over. The human mind is wired to seek closure. And when access to you is suddenly removed, her thoughts naturally circle back to what she no longer understands. Silence creates a mental vacuum and the mind rushes in to fill it. What started as curiosity slowly deepens into fixation because unanswered questions demand attention. At first, she wonders casually, why did he stop reaching out? What changed? But without answers, casual wondering turns into active thinking. She replays conversations, analyzes tone, revisits moments she once overlooked. Each memory becomes a possible clue. And the more she searches for meaning, the more emotionally invested she becomes. Curiosity keeps pulling her back again and again. Obsession doesn't come from intensity, it comes from mystery. When everything is known, the mind rests. When something is unknown, the mind stays engaged. Your disappearance removes predictability. She no longer knows your emotional position. She doesn't know if you've moved on, grown distant, or become stronger without her. That uncertainty fuels imagination, and imagination amplifies emotion. What intensifies this process is the lack of emotional resolution. If you had argued, explained, or made a dramatic exit, she could close the emotional loop. But silence leaves it open. Open loops linger in the subconscious. They resurface during quiet moments, late at night, or during emotional downtime. The absence of closure keeps your presence alive in her mind. Curiosity also shifts focus from herself to you. Instead of feeling in control of the situation, she becomes the observer. She checks for signs. She notices changes. She looks for clues that explain your disappearance. That shift in attention creates emotional engagement, even without contact. Engagement is the foundation of attraction, and curiosity sustains it effortlessly. As curiosity deepens, emotional attachment can quietly strengthen, not because you're doing anything, but because her mind is investing energy. The more mental energy invested, the harder it becomes to detach. That's why silence often creates stronger emotional pull than constant communication. It invites her to participate emotionally without your involvement. Obsession doesn't mean unhealthy fixation, it means sustained emotional focus. And sustained focus changes perception. She begins to see you differently, not as someone available, but as someone unknown again. And unknown feels valuable because it requires effort to understand. Disappearing without explanation turns attention into curiosity, and curiosity keeps you present without being there. When you disappear, one of the quietest yet strongest emotions she feels is the loss of validation. While you were present, your attention served as a mirror. It reflected her importance, her influence, and her emotional impact. Even if she didn't consciously seek it, that validation existed in the background. When you vanish without explanation, that mirror is removed, and the absence of reflection creates discomfort. Validation isn't always about compliments or reassurance. Sometimes it's simply knowing that someone is thinking about you, choosing you, and prioritizing you emotionally. Your presence confirmed that. Your disappearance withdraws it. And when validation is suddenly gone, the ego notices, not loudly but persistently. She may tell herself she doesn't need your attention. She may appear unaffected on the surface, but internally, the absence creates a subtle tension. The question becomes, why am I no longer being chosen? That question challenges assumptions about influence and importance. When someone believed they mattered more than they realized, the sudden loss of validation can feel unsettling. What makes this powerful is that you didn't replace validation with criticism. You didn't argue or accuse. You simply stopped providing emotional reinforcement. There's nothing for her to push against or dismiss. The discomfort comes from within. It forces self reflection rather than defensiveness. The ego relies on emotional feedback to feel secure. When that feedback disappears, self questioning begins. She may start wondering if she took your presence for granted, if she misjudged your emotional investment, if she assumed availability where there was actually choice. Those questions wouldn't arise if you were still there. Validation loss also changes emotional hierarchy. When you were present, she occupied a position of being desired. Your disappearance quietly removes that position. Suddenly, she's no longer at the emotional center. That shift can feel disorienting because it alters how she perceives the dynamic between you. This discomfort often leads to checking behaviors, looking for signs, seeking reassurance indirectly, not necessarily to reconnect, but to restore a sense of influence. Because when validation disappears, the desire to regain it often follows. Your silence doesn't attack her self worth, it simply stops feeding it. And when the feed ends, awareness begins. That awareness can't be ignored because it wasn't created by conflict, but by absence. Withholding validation through calm disappearance creates a feeling she didn't expect, and that feeling lingers. When you disappear, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside her. Doubt starts challenging the decisions she once felt confident about. As long as you were present, emotionally available, and predictable, her choices felt justified. Your reactions reinforced her perspective. But once you're gone, that reinforcement disappears, and without it, certainty weakens. Decisions feel strongest when they're echoed back to us. When someone reacts emotionally, chases, or seeks explanation, it confirms that the decision mattered and made sense. Your disappearance removes that confirmation. There's no emotional response to lean on, no reaction to validate her choice. And in that quiet, the mind begins to revisit what it thought was settled. She starts replaying moments differently. Conversations she once brushed off feel more meaningful Behavior she took for granted gained new context, not because you change, but because distance changes perception. Absence strips away emotional noise and allows memory to resurface without bias, and memory, when revisited calmly, often feels deeper than it did in real time. Doubt doesn't arrive as regret right away. It shows up as questions. Did I misread him? Was I too quick to assume? Did I underestimate his value? These questions form because your silence doesn't match the story she told herself. If you were truly unimportant, disappearing wouldn't feel noticeable. But the fact that it does creates internal conflict. What intensifies this doubt is your composure. If you disappeared dramatically, she could rationalize it as emotional immaturity, but calm absence removes that option. There's nothing to criticize, nothing to blame, just a quiet withdrawal that feels intentional. And intentional behavior forces revaluation. Doubt grows stronger when she realizes you didn't disappear to punish or manipulate. You simply chose self respect. That choice reframes everything. Instead of seeing you as someone who was rejected, she begins to see you as someone who walked away. And that shift in narrative matters. Walking away implies choice, choice implies value. As doubt deepens, emotional curiosity often follows. She wonders where you're going, what you're building, and whether you're becoming someone she misjudged. The decision she once felt confident about now feels incomplete, not necessarily wrong, but unfinished. This is the quiet power of disappearance. It doesn't force regret, it allows doubt to grow naturally. And doubt, once planted, changes how past decisions are remembered. Disappearing turns certainty into reflection, and reflection changes everything. When you simply disappear, something unexpected begins to form beneath the surface. Respect quietly returns, and with it, attraction has room to breathe again. Not the loud, emotional attraction driven by attention or validation, but a deeper, calmer pull rooted in self, respect, and strength. This doesn't happen instantly, and it doesn't happen because you try to impress her. It happens because your behavior signals value without asking for recognition. Respect grows when someone honors themselves. By disappearing calmly, you show that you don't need to remain where you're uncertain, unappreciated, or taken for granted. You don't argue your worth. You don't negotiate your position. You simply step away. That action communicates boundaries, and boundaries are the foundation of respect. People may not always respond to words, but they always register behavior. When you were present and available, your value was easy to overlook. Familiarity softens perception, but absence sharpens it. Disappearing creates contrast, and contrast forces revaluation. She begins to see you not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who chose himself. That shift changes how you're perceived emotionally. Self chosen men feel grounded. Grounded men feel stability is attractive. Attraction also returns because mystery reappears. Constant access removes intrigue. Silence restores it. She no longer knows your emotional state, your intentions, or your direction. That unknown space and curiosity fuels his attraction naturally. You didn't create mystery by playing games, you created it by living your life without needing validation. What strengthens attraction further is consistency. You don't disappear only to reappear emotionally later. You don't send mixed signals. You don't indirectly seek attention. You remain aligned with your decision. That consistency communicates inner confidence, and confidence that doesn't ask for approval is deeply compelling. Respect also grows when she realizes your disappearance wasn't reactive. You didn't vanish out of anger or hurt. You vanished out of clarity. That clarity signals emotional maturity. It suggests that being connected to you doesn't come with chaos or emotional dependency. And emotional maturity creates safety. The kind of safety attraction needs to exist long term. Even if she never reaches out, the shift still works in your favor. You carry yourself differently. You move forward without resentment. You build a life that doesn't revolve around being chosen. And that energy is felt whether or not words are exchanged. Disappearing isn't about getting her back, it's about standing in your value. And when value is clear, respect and attraction follow quietly.